clouded forest isn't just one forest. Today we're exploring one of its most distinctive habitats, the cluster pines biome. Welcome back to another episode of Pandora through a biologist's eyes. For this one, we are here again, as you might have seen with the mushrooms and all of the fogginess, we're in the clouded forest. So I thought it might be nice to take a closer look at the clouded forest since we've went through the biomes on a quick tour, but I want to show you a little bit of the distinctiveness of the clouded forest, I guess, and some of the very unique biomes that we have in here. Because it is all called clouded forest, but we have different types of trees in the clouded forest, of course. Ooh, I just saw this little pond. It looks really, really nice. So at the moment, I'm here in this corner, and we'll just make our way over this way. So first off, we know why it has the name, and that's because of those cluster pines here. Sorry, cloud pine tree, but it's like clustered together, so that's where the name's from. And in the distance, we can see something else that I made its own video about, and that is a sailfin Goliath. Right here, sorry. I do have a separate video about where I just highlight the species. If you're interested, you can of course watch it after this one. So they're very gentle creatures, very calm. They don't attack you, but we can also kill them for materials. I'm not gonna spend too much time with it, but it's very interesting because it has its own little garden area that it's taken care of. And it's a real gentle giant. So we have some very interesting mushroom or fungus structures right here. And what we can notice is that the Navi made their camp here in this big fallen tree. And what we're gonna notice, there aren't any big trees like this in the area, so it must have been like a relic from a long time, because it's the tree that fell down here that it's covering this area isn't there anymore. There are, like, if you look around, there are no trees like this one. We can find them in other habitats though, but this one is dominated by those by these pines that like cluster like this. So I can look it up, it goes all the way to the top. So there is a real-life tree, of course not the real-life earth tree, that is similar like this one. I think it's the Himalayan cedar, and it has those horizontal branches, and then the vertical ones sprout on the way. It's not the, of course, this size, but it's still very interesting. So again, like with all of the other parts of the clouded forest, we have, of course, our mushrooms everywhere. And what's interesting about here, because look how dense the trees are, like directly below, on the underground, there is very few, it's much less sparse than the other areas are. So if we look up here to this arch, we see on the top there's some ikran, so they like to be in areas where there's that's elevated, which would make sense, because birds of prey like to be in elevated positions as well. I hear you flying around. So this is called the lantern beetle. So one thing I've noticed, that the clouded forest definitely has way more insect life compared to some of the other habitats. Like, we can see them flying around and we can hear them. There's like way more little ones that are nameless buzzing around. Just checking if I go the right way. Ah, great, I walked myself right into that one. There's this bird that we can hear, and it sounds a lot like a cuckoo bird. Yeah, here we see it again. Below those cloud pines, it's of course way more sparse because there are not really any light available. Oh, predatory animals. These are Echo Stalkers. No, that's the wrong one. So far we haven't really seen them too much. Echo Stalkers are interesting because they are blind, so they basically have the same niche as a bat, but just they're like ground hunters. And they have this nice little structure that's mimics a bat nose. And they are pack hunters, and they're definitely more built like canines, like the viper wolves compared to the chameleon crawlers that are more like stouty or stocky, I guess. Yeah, I more or less walked in a circle, but that's fine. Because we have this in the way. But yeah, here we can see where the tree goes that fell. We have lots of ferns. And when you can see again, when the canopy is getting more dense, the undergrowth is becoming more sparse. So the clouded forest has lots of these nice pinkish and green tones. So it looks really, really colorful, even though we have those, like I call them the standard conifer trees that we have on Earth too. They still look very like alien or unique, I guess, just because of the coloring that we have on the ground. Like we do have ferns and conifer trees, but they're usually not that nice and pink. Oh, here we have a kite manta. This area also looks really, really great at night because of all of the bioluminescence coming in, because it's one of the very few areas that is kind of like buzzing with sounds still the same as day, because usually we have the nighttime areas and nighttime sounds. And it's... oh, one of those again.
Don't worry.
So there is a mission where the animal is getting like tagged by the RDA, and we can just help them. What's interesting is if the animal dies, like for example, I've seen it. Sadly, I don't have a recording of it, but was being attacked by predators. It kind of like blows up, and there's like this gas that yeah, kills everything in the distance. But well, here we have one of the herbivores, which are prey to the Echo Stalker, and that's a murdeer. I'm honestly not quite sure how to pronounce it. Murdeer, because the first word, the M-E-E-R part, is the German word for sea or ocean. Here we have some more animals. So you've seen those little stagflies, they're really, really tiny, and we saw some other like insect-like animals flying around earlier, the yellow ones, but they don't have a name, sadly. I like how you can hear the little steps. Here we already have the bioluminescence, which I was wondering about the bioluminescence, if it's like kind of like something that turns on at night, or if it's just like constantly glowing. It probably depends on species as well. But it would make sense that like some species have their bioluminescence on constantly, like on in the kind of like, you know, they constantly emit it. But due to the natural sunlight, we can't really see it. So when it's like in a shaded area, we already see the bioluminescence even during the day, because it's like dark enough for us to see it. Yeah, here we can see the other bioluminescence. That's the lanternfly again. Sorry, a lantern beetle. So here we have something that is, well, unnatural, I guess, and that was the human influence. And as you can see, the humans chopped down all of the trees in that area and created a big unnatural clearing. So we wouldn't really have that. Of course, you can have that like one of the tree dies and falls over, and then we have like a big open clearing that nature can take over again. But in this case, it's like way too big. It would be more comparable to like, I don't know, an area being hit by a storm and then multiple trees topple, or a mudslide, which of course isn't really something that happens on the flat surfaces. But of course, we have clearings that happen naturally, but in this case, it was caused by humans. But nature has already taken over after I escorted them out of this place. It's interesting that the power is still on, so we got all of the areas being lit up. And already have some of the fungus taking themselves back. And they hurt when you stand on them. Oh, we also have some of the larger herbivores here, the bonehelm rhino. So typically, I haven't really seen them in the open spaces. Like I've noticed them in the water areas. Oh yeah, here was the other animal I talked about, one of the crawlers. So there's like different animals that have the name crawler. We got the chameleon crawler, and they are built more stocky compared to the Echo Stalkers or viper wolves. They're also pack hunters. But yeah, now we can see the area with its bioluminescence on. And now we know why the lantern beetle has its name, because it looks like a big, nice floating lantern. And here we have some of the smaller insects that don't really have names. And of course, one very aggressive plant. So plant life on Pandora is really, yeah, defensive, which of course is gameplay reasons. But of course on Earth we also have plants that kind of like can defend themselves, like for example stinging nettles, or the worst variant of it, the gimpy gimpy from of course Australia. What is interesting about when we look at the hive, because the hive is clearly a material, because usually the good stuff is on the inside and the outside is something typically made by anorganic materials. It can be, of course, by wax, like honeybees do, or use it to build their hives. But in this case, it's more like a clay substrate, like lots of, yeah, like from termites to different types of wasps or bees, they use it, or use some like of clay. But it's interesting that it's also glowing, which like either would, or oh, you can see it here in the inside. So down here you can see inside the hive. So of course this is just here so we can get it. It's some sort of like a honey. But we have here the openings, so the animals go in. And what's really interesting with the termite burrows that are really, really huge that we have on Earth, they are like a natural chimney for a perfect thingy. Because usually the part that you see isn't the part, at least for termites, or even for ants, that's usually just the outside part, because the true hive is inside, underneath, in the ground, like a huge network all over the place. Of course, they seem to be more inspired by bees, which is basically what you see tends to be the hive. Of course, depending on the species of bee, but they seem to be social. I'm just trying to see if I can get it. So here we can look at it. It's some sort of honey. And they absolutely don't mind you doing that. I'm gonna test something. Now they're angry. Okay, I just want to see if they do something. And they do. Kind of like destroyed their whole home now. But it was for research purposes. So we have more of the nice bioluminescence here. We have one of the sleeping bonehelm rhinos. And we have some rain coming in. That's also something that happens when you have big structures like this. They kind of like block out the rain. So right here, like there's no rain touching me. And then you see the rain starting. Like I'm in the border area. No rain. Rain. No rain. Rain. Alright, let's keep going. We can see the bioluminescence of these trees. I think there's kind of like those dawn sheen ones. Like those, I call them the standard trees with the different kind of colors slapped on that we use for materials. So this area here is also kind of open. And what it could also be, due to the different ground, it looks way more rocky. Oh, I just walked into it. It was sleeping. I didn't even see it. But yeah, the wildlife is sometimes it attacks me and sometimes it's just like, it's not bothered by me. But we can get up close to it. So it has this like beak-like structure, but it still has teeth. And the hunter's guide said it's flaring these little side organs that it has, these ear-like structures, for like mating purposes, or to impress, or mating purposes to impress a partner. But I also could imagine, due to the structure, I could maybe have some help with its echolocation, I guess. Because usually when we have animals with elaborate structures, or that big, large ear-like shapes, for example, like elephants or bats, of course, have, it also helps with the, detecting sound. What is interesting is about the design with, you know, the larger surface and it's opening up this area. It's like the way it's just sensing around. So what it's doing now, it's not really bothered by me, but it's still doing that head movement. So it's not trying, I guess, not trying to scare me off. But it looks more like it's trying to detect stuff. So I don't know if you've seen the movie A Quiet Place. So they got the monster with the echolocation, and it kind of does a similar thing with, you know, opening or increasing kind of like its surface area for trying to detect sound. And the nose is very interesting because it does resemble a bat a lot, and bats, which you might know, also use echolocation. The tail is also interesting because it has this paddle shape, which could also be very helpful, of course, to kind of like do a little speed burst or navigating when they're chasing something. And again, they're social, so they're kind of like in little groups. I just see something. So this one has a different coloration going on. So again, with all of the other animals, we look like this. We see there kind of like a special kind of like quality when it comes to material. But I like to, you know, use it in a more biological sense. So maybe these two are like with a lot of pack animals, especially the like dog-like ones, canines. They typically have a dominant pair, so the mating pair, and then the rest of them tends to be their, you know, relatives, offspring, depending on the size of the pack. So maybe those two are the, you know, the adult ones, and those are maybe like the sub-adult offspring. Like, nice to speculate a little bit. Okay, so this one is missing the party, so it's gonna go left behind. So communication is something that's very important. So usually when animals are close by, they try to communicate like in low, very low hush-hush sounds, usually to not be detected by something else. You might notice that in horses, they tend to kind of like do those slow sounds, such as like some little boo sounds when they're close to each other. But when they get excited, they do this loud neighing, which is like really, really loud. And a lot of animals do that too. So it's usually to convert something. Like you want to say, oh, I'm here. This is my area. Then you're going to be loud. If you don't want to be spotted, you're going to stay quiet. Which is actually the reason why a lot of animals are super fluffy, especially like, you know, typically prey animals that are like kind of small, like think of like bunnies. They're usually very, very fluffy, and that is due to them, you know, decreasing the sound, kind of like how microphones have this little fluffy, hairy thing stuck to them, so it kind of like breaks the sound a little bit. Because a lot of predators are really toned on hearing those sounds of like materials rubbing against each other. And if you're like kind of like very soft, you're kind of like helping breaking that because you have like this increased surface with the little, I'm not sure what they're called, but they get those little filaments going on, so that's why it feels so soft, and that helps break the sound. Which is why if you've ever petted an owl, they're really, really soft because it's the same principle. They're kind of like breaking the sound they make like with the wind, so the wind doesn't make like this sounds like, for example, like pigeons do. Make it with their wings when they fly, which is kind of like an adaptation to, you know, staying quiet. And that's the hammering of a murder, shoving its head into the ground again. So it's really interesting that they seem to have certain patterns with the bioluminescence. So like there's body parts. Also we saw it with the Echo Stalker. Kind of like along some of the, yeah, I think it's called the longitudinal lines that the animals have. Kind of like a pattern, which is really interesting. Because I've noticed this with the Navi too. They seem to have, it's not just like more or less random to a degree, but they also have like lines across the body where the little dots of the bioluminescence are more prominent. Here we have a research camp. So that's something that you can also do in this game. And we got the sunrise coming in. And now that we are at the end of the habitat again, because we walked through, we are here at the water again. And again, it's really interesting to see with it, because you can see all of those branches lying around. And it's very rocky and steep, so we don't have like a kind of like a surface area that doesn't seem to be too grown over, which would again suggest like when it's like raining and it's like stormy and there's lots of water, it kind of like just sweeps through here and is kind of like making this area not that easy to settle for plants. Of course, we have plants that are, maybe we can zoom this one, like that can settle in quite quick, or it's just like very sturdy, with the top part just being, regrown after a flood sweeps it away. But like just by looking at it, it would suggest there's like constant movement here, which makes it hard for, plants to settle in long term. Because here we have the grass and here we don't. Here we have those little flies again. See if I can... Because sometimes I know we can look at them, they have names. Oh, we can see in the distance people. That doesn't work, sorry. I know they have a name because I've seen them in the guide. Well, we can look at this one. It's a large one again. Now you can see pieces of the bark that was still on. I'm not quite sure which tree it is, but I know I definitely saw it around the area. Now something else we have here. Little aquatic animals. Oh, sorry, they are fungus. But they're kind of like just stuck to the rocks, kind of like an anemone would, or sometimes of mussels, clams, or barnacles, which are all animals. Here we have some sort of large lichen. And as we can see, it is kind of deep here. But we don't see too many fish around. Except there's just one, but we don't have the smaller ones, the little nameless fish. Now we have a Bornholm rhino in the distance. We got the humans walking around. And we have something else interesting here, one of those orchids. So these plants are very defensive, because they can just chuck stuff at you. And I also have this one. So we have multiple plants that are kind of like reactive to the weather in this game. Which makes sense, because there's plants on Earth too that kind of like, depending on the weather, like pine cones, for example, they'll open up with more humidity, kind of like opening their scales. Or we also have like sunflowers, or typically lots of other flowers that kind of like adjust themselves to the path of the sun. So one thing I wanted to show you before I leave, due to the structure of these cloud pines, we have another habitat on top of them as well. So they, of course, are defining the biome or the habitat they're growing in, but they themselves also are a habitat for smaller organisms, such as specialized fungus or moss that likes to grow on top of stuff, or those small fungus. Of course, as we've seen earlier in the video, we also have carnivores that can traverse here. So it's like very easy to kind of like parkour your way up. So if you're a somewhat nimble predator, you can also make your way up here. So well, I hope you liked that episode and you saw a little bit about how different, even in the same large area, the clouded forest, we have lots of variety inside, and I wanted to show you one of those unique habitats, which are called biomes in this game, and which would be defined by those cloud pines, which are of course got the name the clustered pines due to them being clustered together like this. Which is really neat, because it's just a level of detail, and we had lots of different animals that are living here, and even though they have, there's different traits shared around the habitat, so we have different similar species found all over the cloud forest, it's still interesting to seeing them inside the different habitats, or interacting with each other, or just simply interacting and existing. So I hope you liked that episode. I hope you, got a little bit of the game. I hear the murderer hammering around down there somewhere. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope you have a great day. And with that, I'll say bye.